Welcome to the Microgreens Mastery Podcast. I'm your host, Jonah Krochmalnik. Together, we'll explore the art of turning tiny seeds into a thriving microgreens empire, sharing insights, coveted secrets, and strategic wisdom from building one of Canada's largest microgreens farms. Stay tuned for thought-provoking conversations with leading figures in the world of microgreens. Welcome to the podcast, everyone. On today's episode, we have Garrett Corwin of Piedmont Microgreens from Durham, North Carolina on the podcast. I am super excited about today's episode. There is a ton of great advice for new and experienced growers alike. We'll be talking about his experience prepping to expand his farm, including hiring his first farm manager, some unique tips and tricks for selling at farmers markets and restaurants, and some great advice on finding work-life balance as a microgreens farmer, and so much more. Let's get right into it. Hey, Garrett. Welcome to the Microgreens Mastery Podcast. I'm really excited to have you on and hear your story.
Thanks, John. I'm excited to be here. First time podcast guest.
Awesome. So we could just get right into it. And I'd love to hear how you first got into microgreens and your backstory with Piedmont Microgreens and how that came to become a company.
Sure. So my background out of undergrad is actually in marine biology and research. And I sort of had a change of heart 4 or 5 years ago and decided to change from sort of the marine world and science to farming and land and business. And that's when I went from working in California on the West Coast and pursued a graduate degree over in North Carolina at Duke and got my first real exposure to market gardening, to being outside farming, production farming. And so I got to learn a lot both at that job in California. I got exposure to like aquaponics, hydroponics. I was responsible for a little sort of food waste recycling program using fly larvae. And then my experience at the Duke farm, I saw a lot of different ways to farm and I just got more and more excited. And I was like, wow, there's a lot of different ways that this can be done, from fish to water to soil. And then I took an internship at freight farms in Boston and learned, saw the sort of upper echelon of indoor high-tech ag, building really high-tech hydroponic systems inside shipping containers. And I got to see the full spectrum from small scale, outdoors in the soil with hand tools to Boston microgreens, freight farms, high-tech indoors. And I sort of took stock of all these things. And when I came back from Boston, I still had a year left in my program. And I said, I really want to start an urban market garden. I really want a public-facing, really interactive farm where it can't be ignored, where people have to see and interact with their food system. But as you can imagine, urban farm is rarely undeveloped or cheap. So I kind of had to take stock of all the things that I had seen of how to farm and just my context. I was a full-time student. I was a part-time farmer at the Duke farm. I had no money. I had very little time. I didn't own land, and sort of landed on microgreens. I said, I want to get into farming now, and based on everything I know in the context of my situation, this is where I have to start. I either have to start now with this, or I have to just wait until my context improves and start with something else later. And I didn't want to wait, and I'm glad I didn't. And so that was sort of the start. I started in the living room of a duplex, apartment I was renting. I deliberetely picked that apartment because it was cheap enough not to have a roommate where I had to explain things to. And, it wasn't an apartment complex, so I didn't have to worry about hauling soil up the stairs or any sort of oversight. And it worked.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's awesome to hear. The small scale farm growing in your house is like I think the most interesting way to start a business. It reminds me of Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak kind of started Apple in their garage. It's kind of like you're just trying to bootstrap it. You're not necessarily trying to make this thing really big, but it starts out that way, being really small, and then it grows and grows kind of naturally, organically over time, which is really cool. And having a marine biology background, I think that's, kind of a good stepping stone into farming, because there is so much that applies. I used to have a saltwater fish tank. The amount I learned from just having that fish tank that applied to farming was actually surprisingly a lot. So I think just from that perspective, understanding how biology works really helps with growing microgreens and getting started on the right foot on the production side of things.
For sure.
But I'd love to get into background on your customers, kind of who your first customers were. Who do you sell your product to now in terms of direct to consumer, retail, restaurants, or distributors?
Yeah, I think I always wanted a really high touch, really personable company. And so I wanted to focus on as many direct to consumer channels as possible. So selling at the farmers market, selling direct to restaurants, to the sort of local grocery stores, so the co-ops and the local chains, more so than the Whole Foods and the Publix of the world, and direct to consumer via home delivery. Those were the types of models I liked. That's the sort of type of food system I wanted to be a part of. Um, and now that we've done a good job at those things, we are dipping more and more into like distributors and seeing what's required by Whole Foods and Publix and these bigger stores. But as of today, we attend one farmers market, which is an exceptional market. So they're about 15% of our revenue. We started with restaurants. That's still, excuse me, that's still a majority of our revenue, about 60%. And the remaining 25% are sort of larger enterprise partnerships, local grocery stores, and like one or two distributors.
Awesome.
And I started with chefs because, again, the context of the time was that I wasn't, there's a timing to application. There's certain times a year that you apply to a farmer's market. I was not within that window, nor did I have the production to service the market I wanted to be a part of. And I figured grocery stores would be more strict. I just assumed, I didn't know, would be more strict about, inspecting your facility, food safety, things like that. Um, and didn't think that I would sort of pass that growing out of a living room. And so I assumed restaurants would care about price and quality. And so that's where we started, and that's still our biggest outlet.
Awesome. So about how many restaurants would you say you sell to right now?
Depending on the season, between 35 and 45.
Wow. Wow. That's a lot. So how do you kind of manage um, the logistics kind of the dealing with so many different restaurants and so many different orders?
It's not too terrible because most people are on standing orders. The ones that aren't, because their demand is not really known, like they're a caterer and so they have last minute stuff, or they just aren't a huge fan of microgreens, but they still want the option to add them last minute. We have a weekly broadcast, a weekly email that we send out that says, here's our predicted extras, here's the varieties, here's the volumes. But because it's a grown to order production type, or at least it is for us and probably for most people, that you're not necessarily managing orders, you're managing changes. So everything is assumed to stay the same unless someone reaches out to us, one of our chefs reaches out and says, hey, let's skip this week, let's change this, let's add that, let's drop this. So you're not managing orders so much as you're managing changes to those orders, which makes it significantly more bearable.
For sure. Yeah, having standing orders is definitely the way to go. With my farm, when we would have new customers, we only would take on standing orders, because having the complete unknown of what they're going to order each week on a small scale farm can be quite difficult to manage. And then your costs go up because you're wasting more product than you kind of plan to. So I'm glad to hear you went the standing order route with restaurants. That makes a huge difference. And I'm really glad that you've had such intention in choosing your customers, rather than just like, oh, where can I get sales? It was intentional in how you wanted to to see the world move forward and how people were to purchase their produce, which I think is really great to have that intention behind where you're actually sourcing customers, or just as when a restaurant, how they're sourcing farms. I think that's really, really great to see, and I think the world needs more of that in running business. So I'm very glad to see you guys doing that over there.
And it makes it easier. I mean, if it made it was really frustrating, and a lot of people feel this when they try to reach out to anybody, but I think it mostly is with restaurants. Um, Trying to learn how to interact with different customer categories. You learn how to deal with chefs. You learn how far before opening should you call, what should you say to the host or hostess, what should you say to the manager, to the chef. I think, yeah, if you start out trying to go 5 ways at once, you learn nothing or very little or very slowly about 5 different customer demographics. Whereas, although it was frustrating as hell and still is sometimes to sell to restaurants, I get it. Like, I have a framework for restaurants now because I've made hundreds of calls. And that would have been much slower going if we were less deliberate.
For sure. Yeah. The more you do of one thing, you do the hard thing 1,000 times rather than doing the hard thing 100 times and then doing other things. You'll learn a lot more in the process of doing it the 1,000 times, because you'll perfect the formula or recipe on how to get restaurant customers, or how to do anything in business, but applying it to the conversation we're having now. So that's really awesome. We went restaurants pretty early on, and then we transition to distributors pretty fast for restaurants. So we got quite a bit of insight, but we didn't do it the 1,000 times. So we didn't perfect the formula to sell to restaurants. That sounds like you guys kind of have done, which is awesome. So what kind of insights have you gained about customer preferences and trends in microgreens consumption over the years that you've been running Piedmont Microgreens?
I think I wish we had more public insight, more consumer facing, farmers market type interactions. Thankfully, we do well, and we're well received at the Durham Farmers Market. We haven't really changed anything about how we do the Durham Farmers Market, which is mostly the insight I'm going to speak on. In the probably 18 months we've been at that market, we do sunnies, peas, a mild mix, and a spicy mix every single week. Done it since the start. It's great. It's all approachable. We always have a farmer's choice, which is just a blend that changes every quarter or so. And then we have specialties. We have sort of all the odds and ends of partial trays that get left over after the restaurant orders. And it gives people a chance to try things that they would never try. We would never sell, even as bespoke and high touch as we are and want to be. We would never sell to the co-op. We would never sell them beet or basil or cilantro because the numbers don't work out. It's a really hard agreement to come to. But people can come to the market and buy those things, and having changed nothing from that basic framework of what we sell and how we sell it at the market, our average market revenue has gone up every quarter since we started, independent of season. It doesn't matter if it's winter and market is 2 hours instead of 4 hours. We're selling the same amount of product, if not more, in half the time. There's other things going on there, but I think people are just, you just need to give it time. It was well received when we started, and that's partially based on our geography and Durham and North Carolina and sort of the agricultural scene here. But having changed nothing, we just, that number keeps going up. We just bring more product, and I think people are getting more used to it. They've been around longer. They learn more about the health benefits and the uses, and it's just becoming more integrated. So I think time is just important. Time to learn, time to build that exposure. Yeah,
for sure. Yeah, the time return ratio of farmers markets it's a longer term play, and I'm very glad to hear that. What I thought was generally the case with farmers markets, we did it for about 2 summers, is that the longer you are at farmers markets, the more exposure, more recognition you have, and the easier it is for a customer to go and buy. And then there's kind of like this group mentality at farmers markets where if a lot of people are at your booth, then more people are going to come to your booths. It's a very
Definitely.
herd mentality. So there's a lot of very interesting psychology in selling at farmers markets,
Yeah.
which is really interesting. But I think it's really cool how you guys are selling like the restaurant kind of crops like beets, cilantro, basil, those that normally just wouldn't make sense at farmers markets because, like you said, the price point is way too high. The economics just don't work out. People aren't going to want to spend twice as much as the farmer's
Right.
choice mix or spicy mix. So that's great that customers get to try that, and it's a win-win where they would normally never get to try that unless they went to those restaurants, and then you get to sell the extra product you have, so you have very minimal waste by
Very.
utilizing that aspect of the farmers market.
Yeah, I think people should find a good farmers market or a customer like a food bank or something like that that will pay for anything. They might pay less because they're food bank and it's sort of the end of the food line. But just having one of those customers that can take that excess, even if it's at a discount, it sucks to waste. And so at a minimum, you can cover your costs, and at best, you can sell it at a profit. And it's just, even if you just have one farmer's market, um, it feels good to
Yeah,
end the week and have zero waste.
for sure. Yeah, waste is definitely uh, a big problem, especially on large scale farms. Now, most microgreen farms try to minimize waste, but yeah,
Mhm.
either donating it is an option if you don't have an outlet to sell it. And usually there's some sort of tax credit available. Obviously, it depends on your
Mhm.
jurisdiction, but there's usually something available to help offset some of the cost of the product when you donate it. And then it's usually going to usually a very good cause. So
Yeah,
the farmers market is obviously a better option. But if that's not an option for some people, then they should know that there are benefits to donating the product rather than throwing it away if they have that option.
yeah.
So what like out of your product mix that you have, what would you say are your most popular mixes or most popular individual microgreen products?
It's pretty similar between restaurants and the farmers market. It's our brassica blend, which is broccoli, cabbage, and kohlrabi. So it's a good, mild, versatile blend. Our spicy mix, which is arugula, radish, and mustard. And then sunflower shoots are still pretty popular. Pea shoots are surprisingly not. I think they're so mainstream. Like they were the first things that showed up in grocery store shelves that people want something more exciting. It's still beet, basil, and cilantro for individual varieties, and people just get really excited about the specialties. The What we do is we do a container instead of like, oh, we have a little bit of beet extra, let's put that in a container. It's let's get a 24-ounce container and put 2 ounces of specialty product in it, but it'll be like sort of a strip of basil, a strip of cilantro, and a strip of beet, or shiso and celery and fennel or whatever. So it's not a blend, but it's all in the same packaging, so they can take it out and use it individually how they please. People love that. So besides the brassica blend, spicy mix, cilantro, basil, and beet, it's people just love to try those things that they can't find elsewhere.
Yeah, I definitely consider myself a foodie, and when I get to try new things, when I like new fruits or new vegetables, it's very, very exciting. So for people that have never tried things like shiso or micro celery, it can kind of blow your mind, or like things like
Yeah,
micro cilantro or basil. So I feel cilantro is one of them where people either love or they hate cilantro, and the people that love cilantro are absolutely blown away. It's like the the part of cilantro you want without the soapiness that some people say
yeah,
it has, that soapy flavor. So you get all of the flavor kick of cilantro without the soapy flavor, and people love
yeah,
it. And for someone like me, I love cilantro. I could put it on anything.
yeah, yeah, definitely.
We can start getting into production, and this is my favorite part of talking to microgreens farmers. And always, what I found the most interesting is production, how people grow, and the differences between different farms. I think is very, very fascinating. So, if you, I'd love to hear like an average week in your role as a microgreens business owner and farmer. and what that kind of looks like over an average week.
Sure. I explain to my employees that the week starts on Thursday morning. Thursday, early morning, I get up and start harvesting around 3 or 4 in the morning. And the reason I explain that that is the start of our week is because aside from the things that are time dependent, right? Certain things get planted on Monday, certain things on Wednesday, certain things on Friday that need to be planted on those days so that they all match up on their harvest date, their maturity. But aside from that, once the second that tray is cut, it can be composted, cleaned, refilled, and put back in the farm. In effect, right? If you had 20 people working, like you could be done, you could be harvested, packed, composted, cleaned, refilled, all done by the end of Thursday. And like that's the start of the week, is the start of the harvest. So I start around 4 a.m. harvesting on Thursday morning. And Thursday and Friday is basically a series of harvest, deliver, harvest, deliver. We have 2 delivery routes. Thursday is Durham. Friday is the rest of the sort of region. And then Saturday morning is the Durham Farmers Market. Sunday is sort of a flex day, a recovery day, if you will, of not much is going on. Right now, somebody comes in to start cleaning, clean the farm, things like that. And then Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday are not much is going on. Monday, we have a big planting day. Tuesday, today, nothing happens. It's just watering the farm. But Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, as the owner, are days where I can really focus on sales or modifying or adding manuals or SOPs, pursuing, small projects, whether it's retrofitting our van or anything like that. So it's really Thursday, Friday, Saturday is harvest delivery, selling at the farmer's market. Sunday's kind of in the middle. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday is everything else. It's sales, it's catching up on cleaning, planting, filling trays, and all the small projects.
Nice. Yeah, it's really great to hear that you have a few days where it's much lighter and you can focus on building the actual business in whatever capacity that looks like, which is always changing and always evolving.
Yeah.
And making time to do sales, or like you said, SOPs, I think are really important, and something that's not often thought about in the early stages of microgreens businesses. That's quite crucial in expanding it and hiring staff. I'm glad you've gone that route, because otherwise it can be quite chaotic without having that, which I've learned in some ways in the early years of hiring staff that stuff is very valuable and pretty much a necessity to running what appears on the surface to people that haven't run a microgreens business as a pretty simple business. You grow some greens, you cut them, you harvest them, but there's so much behind the scenes that needs to be dealt with and figured out. And precision is obviously an important one that SOPs help with keeping things consistent when you as the business owner aren't available to do production or are focused on other things.
Yeah, definitely.
So I find in the conversations I've done in consulting and just talking to farms over the years that a lot of microgreens growers there's usually something that they do that's unique for their farm. I don't know if there is anything that's like unique or unusual, that whether it's production or equipment that you guys adopt in your business, that we can share with the audience.
I thought about this one, and I don't think today there's anything super unique about our production. I think what I maybe cherish or has been hard fought is the context of how we grow. And by that, I mean, I own my house here on I think it's roughly a 7,000 acre lot, which is very, very small. It's, just over a tenth of an acre. And the farm operates today out of the detached garage, but it is a 4-bed, 3-bath house. And I have 3 tenants, not, these are people that are paying to rent rooms in the house that have nothing to do with the business, that want a parking spot. They want to be, to live their own life, to be students or be young professionals, and they don't want to be bothered by employees or the dirt of the business or whatever. And so it's a lot going on in a very small space, running a scaling for-profit farm out of a garage with now, as of tomorrow, 3 employees, 4 people that live here with 4 cars on the lot, and a van that has to be parked on the side street because there is no place to park it for it to live on property. So it's just a lot going on in a very small space. And then even within the farm, I think I take maybe too much pride in how much stuff we fit in the garage, from stuff that's hanging from the ceiling to climate control equipment to just sheer tray throughput. Um, and so yeah, it's just fun, a little puzzle of how can we get more in this space while we find a bigger space to move into.
Yeah, I've seen videos of your setup, and it's very impressive how much production you fit into a garage, which is a testament to how well microgreens can do in a small space. So people that aren't in the microgreen space may not realize how productive a small amount of square feet can be. So how many square feet is your garage?
The garage is just under 400 square feet, and we have a little bit of space outside and behind the garage for storing pallets of soil. We can really only have 1 pallet at a time. And then all of our planting, all of our tray cleaning, and for 8 months of the year, our edible flowers are all outside. So our total sort of production and usage space is maybe 700 or 800 square feet.
And roughly what's your weekly tray production in that space?
Right now we do 200 to 220, and I think we could probably we could have 450 or so trays in production. And since some of those are multi-week herbs, we could hit probably 300 plus trays harvested per week.
Yeah, so in a very small amount of space, you can really produce like an insane amount of microgreens. And if you do it the right way, which you're definitely doing it the right way in terms of maximizing production, you can really make a very profitable business in a small amount of space. So I like there's people that think you have to have acres and acres of land or like a giant greenhouse to grow microgreens. You really don't. You need to start at like a small corner of a room that's climate controlled, which almost everyone has. Even if you're in a small condo in a big city, you still
Yeah.
have that kind of square footage to start. And there's people in Toronto that there's friends of mine that knew a microgreens farm that they were just in a condo and they were growing and selling living trays and delivering them. I think it was on their bike downtown. So the possibilities are really endless with microgreens because of the limited amount of space you actually need to start and grow a microgreens business, which is awesome because space, and especially in the cities, is crazy expensive now. It's a great way to reduce your rent in one case or start a business.
Yeah.
I think it's really cool that you've kind of maximized your space home wise and garage wise with the production of microgreens. I think that's really cool. And you're using the outside space too to a certain degree for most of the year, which is nice in a somewhat warm climate.
Yeah.
I would consider your North Carolina warm climate compared to where I am. Yeah, that's really cool. One thing that getting to the scale that you're at, a lot of people experience disease and potential pest issues in the microgreens production. How have you experienced any of that in the years you've been growing, and have you had to manage any sort of outbreaks of disease or pests?
We did, and I think it's mostly gone away now because we changed some of our cleaning and sanitation practices. But I was coming from a sort of outdoor field production mentality where a lot of the cell trays that you use to grow seed starts in, at the farm that I worked on, we didn't really sanitize those. There wasn't a huge biological pressure because when you're planting seedlings for mature production, they're not so dense, and those trays aren't occupied with soil and with life all the time. So we would plant those seedlings, transplant them, and then you'd end up with the empty cell tray, and you'd probably just lay it out in the sun because the sun is a great sterilizer. And so we never really had a protocol for cleaning those cell trays, and I carried that mentality into my farm. And I said, if we harvest and we dump this compost and we lay these trays out in the sun for 12, 24 hours, a few days, that should be good enough. And it was for a lot of varieties. We never really had problems. And I just took the degree of disease we did have as an acceptable tolerance. I said, if we lose 10% of our crops, which now I would be appalled to see, that that wastage is worth the saved time and effort of cleaning our trays every week. Um, I've since long abandoned that, and now we do clean our trays every single week. We sterilize them with xylitol. Our disease is now less than 1%. So that was, yeah, I think just applying something well intentioned from a different type of farming to this type of farming. The change in context warranted a change in procedure that I didn't initially pick up on. So we don't really have all that much disease. We really deal with fungus gnats, and we deal with damping off, or the diseases that cause death in seedlings. And for fungus gnats, we hang those yellow sticky traps. And for damping off, it just comes down to cleaning your trays every week and sterilizing them. We use dilute xylitol, and they do feed into each other. If you have a lot of disease and death in your farm, it creates the perfect breeding ground for fungus gnats. So by solving the damping off issue, by cleaning your trays, cleaning your farm, and sourcing really high quality seed lots, you have less damping off, less mold, less habitat for fungus gnats, and so then those go down in turn.
Yeah, for sure. And for those that don't know what xylitol is, it's or an organic disinfectant that's made up of acetic acid, which is vinegar, and hydrogen peroxide, and it's a very effective tool to manage a lot of bacterial and fungal diseases in microgreens and a lot of other greenhouse
Yeah.
crops and outdoor crops. And the great thing is that it's natural. It dissipates, so it doesn't stay on anything that it's sprayed on. So they even use it on most microgreens farms, and I don't know anyone that's actually sprayed it directly on the living part of the plant. But it can be used for that because it's safe
Yeah.
enough, which is great.
Yeah.
One thing that I found with disinfecting that maybe helped to some people is I was kind of in the same boat as you, where I was like, I came from outdoor farming, and I saw people kind of other farmers just would leave the soil in the tray and let it sit there and then use it the next season. It's not a big deal. Most of the time, there's not enough disease to cause enough
Yeah.
pressure. But when using trays every week, all it
Yeah.
takes is a bad lot of seed or a little bit of pythium or dampening off, the same thing, in the trays to spread, and then it can be almost like a wildfire at a certain point with certain crops that are more prone to it. So I find if you remove the soil particulate from the tray first and then disinfect with something like xylitol, is much more effective than either doing it at the same time or disinfecting then removing the dirt, because anything
Mhm.
that's stuck on, so any soil that's stuck on the tray, in the part that's actually stuck on the xylitol or any disinfectant can actually get in to
Yeah.
dislodge any bacterial colonies that are in there. So it makes a big difference in that. But I'm glad to hear that you have a disinfecting protocol, because I feel that a lot of farms avoid that step because it's very time consuming.
Yeah.
But then, to your point, what is 10% of your harvest worth? And it's usually
Exactly.
quite a bit of money. So
Yeah.
even from an economic perspective, it often makes sense um, to uh, uh, to disinfect, and the economics work out
I
for
think
his favor.
if I had to guess, when you consider all the stages involved in producing a container of microgreens, you have filling, planting, water or germinating, watering, harvesting, labeling those lids or anything you do to the packaging, composting, and then cleaning. Of all those steps, the one that is easiest to not do and keep on producing a product is cleaning. You can't not plant. You can't not put soil down. You can't not water. You can't not, I mean, maybe you can not label your lids and then you just have a brandless container, but like it's the only step that you can not do and still probably grow something. So that's probably why it's the one that beginners and those that are overwhelmed in their operation tend to ignore. And I was that way. And I think that's just like the most logical way, the most logical reason as to why it gets skipped.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I never really thought of it that way, but yeah, looking back, like when you're in the weeds, like running your business and your time is of the essence. Like it's easy. Yeah, like you said, it's one of the only things you really can't actually skip. That's
Yeah.
a very good point. I never really thought of it that way, but I'm glad you mentioned that. So yeah, I'd love to hear if you have any plans to expand your farm in the
Mhm.
future, whether it's production space or customer base, and kind of what your plans are moving forward with Piedmont Microgreens.
So it's been a long process trying to find, and I'm not going to say commercial space, I will say expansion opportunities. Thankfully, I, as well as some of my team members, have farming experience in other forms. So, like outdoor market gardening. We tried for about a year and a half, everything from designing our own facility and doing a custom build, which is an insane jump from a garage, to renting land that was behind a local restaurant that we worked with to build a quarter acre market garden, to renting commercial space, buying commercial space, and it was just impossible. Everything fell through, or owners and landlords didn't want to rent to us because we're an indoor farm and that's a weird tenant type. And we finally managed to buy a commercial space. We're currently under contract, so we haven't officially closed on it yet, but it is two commercial units inside of a broader single story commercial complex. Each unit is about 2,000 square feet. So we will move into and renovate one of those units and keep the other one rented. And that was just the nature of the sale. We had to buy both in order to win, if you will. And it is nice though, because it means we have a rental income in the other one. And in the future, should we outgrow the 2,000 square foot space and the lease ends on the other unit, we can always, we have sort of another expansion route already built in. So that's nice from a space perspective. From a personnel perspective, tomorrow is actually onboarding day for a full-time farm manager. So I will, receive and give those responsibilities over to her. And I'm really excited about that. I think the team members I currently have, the part-time employees, have done a wonderful job. Actually, as of last week, I did not do the farmers market for the first time ever. And they handle a lot of the stuff, but it's going to be very nice to have a full-time farm manager so I can focus fully on the new space, more sales, things like that. So those are the big advancements here. We finally found space and we finally reached a point where I can have someone that runs the farm while I run the business.
That's awesome. Congratulations. That's
Thank you.
on two fronts with the commercial space,
Yeah.
which we've had talks on that prior. But even the farm manager, that's a massive step in giving you the time to focus more and more of your energy and time on the business and less doing the day to day. So congratulations on that. That's really, really exciting. I'm really excited for you.
Thank you.
Yeah. I know we talked earlier about you're potentially launching or working on a software program for farmers. So I'd love to hear about that and what you're kind of working on with that.
Yeah, it's a problem I think a lot of farmers experience, especially when you're just getting into the space. You say, man, I got 20 crops, each have 5 life stages. They're a little bit different. I have 20 customers. They want orders on Tuesday and on Friday. How do I manage it all? It's basically just a big logistics equation. And generally the solution is build your own Excel sheet or buy someone else's, or do it on a whiteboard or do it on sticky notes. It's all very by hand. It's all very intuition based and done by gut as you develop the sense of how your farm flows and yields come in and stuff. And there's just no good solution out there right now for crop planning, specifically for microgreens, specifically for the sort of grown to order model, the predictable model that we have, as opposed to outdoor production. And so I partnered with my brother, who happens to be a former Meta software engineer. So I bring the farming expertise, the knowledge of the industry, and he brings the expertise in building and launching software and apps and coding. And so we've been working for about 6 months for me to get him to understand how our world works here with microgreens, and he has been building the software. So we finally have a beta version. We have gone with the name Microgreen Manager, clean, straightforward, to the point. And we currently have, aside from my farm as a beta tester, we have 4 other farms that are now using the software. They've been introduced to it and given the sort of onboarding protocol, and we will see how they like it. And I think most farms are probably about 80% the same, and we all vary based on scale or context or customer type in about 20% of how we produce. So it'll be really nice to see the nuances of those different farms, and we will, fingers crossed, have a product that is live in public in about a month or a month and a half,
Oh,
depending
wow.
on the next few weeks and what we hear back.
Awesome. That's exciting. Yeah,
Yeah.
they're like most farms I know, including my farm, were to you like the notes I had, like when I started hiring staff, when they saw my notes, they were like pulling their hair out, like, what is this? How are we supposed to understand that? And that's when we started developing Excel sheets, like you said,
Yeah.
to kind of work on this. But it's great to see more tools being available for microgreens farms to manage the logistics and planning side of things, because I'm very logic oriented and math oriented. But so for me, it was very easy to understand how everything works, partially because I designed the system that we had. But when you start hiring staff, that's really when it's crucial to have some sort of uh, properly designed and
Mhm.
implemented management system for production, for logistics, for staffing. It'll just make life so much easier. And I like going back. There's so many things I wish I could have had when the time came, but I'm glad that tools like this are being developed and implemented for the next generation of microgreens farms, that they don't have to worry about making Excel spreadsheets and finding what works for the farm. They can implement
Yeah.
something that's already done. And I always say, like, if the wheel's already been invented, don't reinvent it. If there's some same thing with equipment, if there's a piece of equipment that I can buy, I don't want to custom make it. I only want to custom make something that isn't already available, because
Yeah.
time is, in my opinion, our most crucial resource. And the more time we can spend on the things that matter, and less time on things that we need to custom create and just find ready-made
Yeah.
solutions, the better we'll all be off as growers or business owners. So that's really exciting to hear, and I'm excited to see when it's released and have more and more farms use that product. So let's get into some some more of the what I consider fun questions, which are the more personal type of questions. So
Sure.
as most microgreens growers or any farm or business owner knows, the work-life balance is really tough to
Mhm.
manage. So I'd love to hear how you maintain healthy work-life balance and what tips you can give to other microgreens growers or farmers on how to do that.
Yeah. The realistic answer is you don't. Uh, Farming is traditionally a very imbalanced profession. It might have a little more balance depending on vegetable versus animal production and the extremeness of your climate. For example, you might live in an area with really extreme winters, so you can only grow in the summer. So you have really long, hard days, and you have a very full summer, and it's really depleting. But then you get all of winter to sort of vacation, if you will. Um, but I think farming is just because you're it's like childcare. You're dealing with something that relies on you entirely for its life. So I think farming historically is very imbalanced. And even farming today, market gardeners are no different than commodity farmers, than animal farmers. It's just the profession. You don't get into farming without a lot of passion. So I say don't get into it unless you're okay with that imbalance. And then there's just the nature of business. If you want to start a business, like you said earlier, I think a lot of people maybe misdiagnose what microgreens are. They can be a side hustle, but there's no free lunch. If you want a profitable, scaled business with employees that you're not working, 80 hours a week for years on end, it's a business. It requires a lot of commitment and a lot of hard work up front. And your life will be imbalanced for months, but probably years until you reach a scale where you can hire a full-time manager and have a payroll company and have systems in place and put in that effort. But so that's the sort of, I think, depressing sounding upfront answer, which is you don't have balance. It's a imbalanced profession combined with the imbalance of starting a business. But the light at the end of the tunnel is that, if you develop it right, that you should eventually reach a point where you do reclaim some of that balance. And so with that, I will say, running PMG, running Piedmont Microgreens, and now starting this software company with my brother, I'm thankful that I'm at a point with PMG where I have the space and the people to relinquish some of that responsibility. And I have such a skilled brother, thankfully, that can also, help co-found this next business together. And even still finding that balance, I think my advice is to say, pick your minimums. Pick your minimums for time with your partner, time with your family or friends, time with people on a weekly basis. Pick your minimums for fitness. So for me, I really try to defend working out 3 times a week. And I just make sure when I go to the gym, I only stay for an hour. I have my workouts for an hour exactly. I'm in the door, out the door in an hour. If I can't even do that, 3 times a week, I will just go for a run. That's 30 minutes. I'm at least moving 3 times a week. That's my minimum. And I have different minimums for different aspects of my life, but figure out what those are. It takes time to test the waters there, that maybe you need to raise or lower them depending on the tolerances of your health or your family. How much time are they willing to give up with you so that you can, grow your business? But that's my advice, I think, is pick your minimums, and they'll be different for each aspect of your life, and they'll change. I probably used to go to the gym 5 days a week, and now it's 3, and I'm okay with that. So
That's awesome. I love that perspective of having a set minimum to create that balance, to force yourself to have that balance, because it's very easy to get completely swept away in your business and focus on that solely. I've done that, and it hasn't been good for the personal side of my life. So I, over the years, have found a better balance, but I never thought of it in the aspect of having minimums that are like, you guarantee yourself that you're going to spend X amount of time focusing on other things. And I think that's a great perspective shift for probably a lot of people that are right now deep in the weeds, and their sole priority in life is their business, which as it often needs to be to get to a certain point. Mm-hmm. But to find a little bit more balance there, because I know one of the biggest challenges with microgreens farms in particular, because there's no seasonality or very little seasonality, burnout is a big problem. Yeah. It's a very repetitive type of business, for good and for bad. And being able to prevent that burnout with things like procedures and automation and hiring staff will allow that to happen. But in the meantime, to have those minimums in place so you keep your external life outside of your farm in a good place, so that when you do have more time, everything is still there. Your relationships and your personal life are still where you want it to be, while also running a business. But it is a very, very difficult balancing act to find. I think a lot of people that have a microgreens farm or have a farm in general definitely understand how difficult that can be, because it's farming, like you said. It's like something that requires sometimes attention 7 days a week, because there could be a problem with the farm, or there's just random things that happen that require your attention on a weekend, that a business that is like a digital business or a physical product that doesn't need care every day,
yeah.
they don't have these type of issues.
It's okay not to have minimums. Like, when you start, I remember when I started, because I was still a student and still part-time farm worker, I said, it was almost the opposite. I said, I'm gonna have a minimum for my business, not for the rest of my life. My minimum for the first 6 months was I'm just going to do one thing for my business every day. Today, I'm going to look at the different, website builders, or today I'm going to figure out what payment processor I'm going to use, or whatever. And now it's, the opposite, but you can look at it that way when you're starting, and it's okay not to have minimums. There was probably a span in there where I didn't deliberately work out for like 9 months. And that just goes to the imbalance of farming and starting a business, that it's okay. Approach your friends or your partner and say, hey, I'm about to start this really exciting but difficult thing. Um, I'm not going to have the time that I have right now. Like, preface it, bring it up. It's okay not to have minimums. It's part of it.
For sure. For sure. Awesome. That's really great advice. I'm glad you were able to share your insight on that. Um, so I'd love to hear what some of the most, whether you sell them or not, what some of the most unique or exotic varieties of microgreens you've grown are, because there's like hundreds and hundreds of varieties, and there's some that people don't even know exist. So if there's
Mhm.
any that you found were really unique or exotic or interesting, I'd love to hear your experience with testing them out.
It probably is the perennial herbs. Most herbs and vegetable crops that I and others grow are all annuals. The perennial herbs would be things like, assuming I'm not getting these wrong, like anise, hyssop, sage, thyme, mint, as opposed to annual herbs like cilantro, dill, fennel, and so forth. And we don't grow those. We've played with them. They just tend to take too long, and there's too little demand and too little yield per tray. But I really like thyme. I really like sage. Sage is just so fluffy and like soft and cute. Like all microgreens, is just a shrunk down version of the mature thing, but it's just really cool to see sage. So
That's cool. Yeah, I've never even thought to grow sage microgreens. I've grown thyme before.
Mhm.
Thyme is one that is a perennial, and it's relatively fat. Like for a perennial, I think we were able to get in like a month like a pretty good size, like larger
Yeah,
than microgreens. There's they're just so slow. But yeah, I'm very interested. I might actually I have some sage seed. I might actually plant some just to
yeah,
see, because I've never planted from seed and watched it at a small stage. I'm curious now. I'm thinking of lamb's ear, if you know what that is. It's like
mhm,
a perennial herb that's just like really, really soft,
yeah,
fluffy, fuzzy leaves. I'm curious to how it looks and tastes and stuff. So I'm actually I might actually grow that.
yeah.
So I'd love to hear what your personal favorite, if you pick one microgreen that you use on in your personal life, and then how you actually use them. What if you could pick one that you can only have to use? What would it be, and how do you use it at home?
Not one variety, but one blend is our Brassica blend, our nutrition mix, which is broccoli, cabbage, and kohlrabi. I'm not a huge fan of the spicy nature of our spicy mix, our arugula, radish, mustard kind of stuff, and it's just versatile. It's just I can add it to smoothies. I can add it to my eggs, to my sandwiches. If I have a nice like sort of smooth soup, if you will, something that's homogeneous, adding it back in gives a good texture. And I usually suggest people, if they like something spicy, using the spicy mix in the same way. Singular varieties, probably Genovese basil, and making little mini like caprese salads.
Hmm. Yeah, that's good. Yeah. The brassicas are great. People don't often realize how well they work in smoothies. So
Mm,
things like broccoli, we found a formula over the years that you can put in a lot of broccoli microgreens and you
yeah,
won't even taste it if you mix it with the right mix of other fruits.
yeah,
Um, and it's incredible because you would never think, you think of like a head of broccoli, it's so strong flavor. Like I love the flavor of broccoli, but some people don't like the flavor of brassicas. Like
yeah,
I get it, it's very sulfury, but you can put in broccoli microgreens in a smoothie, and same thing kohlrabi, kale, and you can almost not taste it, and you can still put in quite a bit and get that nutrition for those that don't actually want to taste the greens but want the nutrition of it, because microgreens are uh, so nutritious compared to the mature vegetable counterparts. The Genovese basil, I usually make pesto with it, but that's having a Capri salad is a great way to use it too. I've never even thought of that either. So let's move on to some of the challenges you faced with your microgreens farm. So what, like in terms of marketing and selling microgreens, which is often a difficult part of the business for newcomers, What challenges have you faced, and how have you overcome them, whether it's recently or early in your business?
I think two things come to mind, which are it's one of the advantages of this industry is that it is very easy to start a farm. Most people start in a spare room or in the basement or something like that. It's low capital, low time, low knowledge, even. That means, though, that a lot of microgreen farms come and go. We've been around for coming up on 3 years, which is short generally in the span of an established business. I think 75% or 90% or some very high number of businesses in general fail before 5 years. And so I think the ease with which someone can get into microgreens also means that they will get out of it very easily as well if it proves not to be the get rich quick scheme they thought it would be or whatever. And as such, I hear a lot of chefs, not anymore because we are established, but when I was starting, that they were skeptical to work with us switching from a distributor or someone that they could just kind of knew they've been around, they continue to be around, is because they don't want to get used to a local provider because they've been burned in the past. They've had other microgreen farms come and go. They love the product. They sort of were okay with adding the mental load of sourcing certain ingredients like microgreens from local producers rather than getting microgreens along with everything else from a big distributor. And then the microgreen farm would go out of business and it was just a burden to them. So again, it's kind of like time will only help you there, that you just have to live with it for a while. Social proof helps, look at all these other restaurants that have joined us. They trust us that we'll stick around, and by them supporting us, we will hopefully stick around, the staying power of that. So that was one thing that we don't really face anymore, but I think newer farms will face. And then the other thing with selling, again, especially to restaurants, is having to justify a premium price compared to distributors. And the way that we tend to get around that is talking about wastage or product that goes bad. And again, a lot of our restaurants are used to getting deliveries of microgreens on a Tuesday and a Friday. They want Tuesday for the week and Friday for the weekend. And they still probably get that cadence from their distributors because they're getting other things from those distributors. But the reason mostly that they're doing it for microgreens is because the stuff that they're getting from distributors has such a terrible shelf life. It's already a couple days old when it gets to them, so they only have a couple days to use it. And we still have to train existing chefs and new chefs to understand that if you get it on a Friday, even if you're a restaurant that for some reason is open Monday through Friday, if you're getting it on Friday and it's just going to sit in your walk-in for 4 days until you open again next week, it's going to be totally fine. And so the sort of education there is, yes, you're paying between 25 and 200% more for our product than you are from Restaurant Depot. You're not going to waste half of it because it goes bad. So really, you're not spending all that much more. You're still probably spending more, but the gap is a lot smaller than you think.
Yeah, I think the it's a great point to focus on what benefit are you actually bringing to that type of customer. For example, if you go to a restaurant and focus on solely the health benefits of microgreens,
Yeah.
that might not be the right fit, because microgreens that chefs are using, maybe they're using it for health benefits, but realistically they're probably using it as a garnish to make the dish look more beautiful, and they're more focused on the economics of buying the microgreens than maybe an end consumer might be. So if you can pitch that the shelf life is going to be so much better, that you're going to have, let's say, 50% less waste, but it costs 25% more, it not only saves you money, but saves you time in having to worry about, okay, now I need to reorder these microgreens because they went bad, because they come from out of state and they've been sitting in a warehouse for a week before they actually get to us. So it's important to have the context of who are you selling to and what do they actually want, rather than just blindly promoting the health benefits of microgreens, which is a good thing, but it may not be the right fit for the type of customer. So I think that's
Here's my ask to you or to someone who listens to this is make a triangle that has flavor, nutrition, and looks, at the corners. And I can't help but think about this thing from college. People would say in college, or probably in grad school as well, you have sleep, good grades, and a social life. Pick two. You can't have all three. And it feels the same. It's like, depending on who you're selling to, it's nutrition, aesthetics, or flavor. And so if it's restaurants, to your point, it's probably flavor and aesthetics. If it's farmers market patrons or home consumers, it's probably nutrition and flavor. I don't know who doesn't want flavor, so I don't know if it's that third category, but like, yes, you have to speak to the concerns of the particular customer type.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Well, I was just thinking when you said that, maybe people that are using it solely for health benefits, maybe they care more about aesthetics and not so much about flavor, but often flavor and nutrition tend to uh, be mostly like quite correlated, because usually
Yeah,
the better they're grown with better inputs, the better nutrition they have, and generally the better flavor they have. But it's definitely
yeah.
not always the case. Um, so did you encounter any crops that required a significant amount of time to perfect that growing recipe? Because I know there's a lot of microgreen crops that are quite easy to grow, they're beginner friendly, and then there's some that are can be quite challenging for a lot of people. So I don't know if you have one in particular that was just really hard to figure out, but then you were able to, and then kind of how that process came to be.
I'd say we had a lot of problems pre sanitation protocol. As I said, we thought that there were just nuances that we had yet to discover about certain crops. We'd get damping off in arugula and many others, and we're like, okay, well, arugula maybe it's just really sensitive to overwatering. That was usually our remark on our sort of cheat sheet for understanding the crops, is like, these 5 crops suffer from overwatering, from damping off and pythium, which is generally driven by too much moisture in part. This is like, cool, these things we need to keep troubleshooting. Maybe we put them in a different part of the farm that has more airflow, or we're kind of just shooting in the dark. And then of course you change your cleaning protocol and you go, oh, it wasn't the plant, it was us. It speaks to sort of getting rid of making things that are variables constants, that, well, I can now be fairly confident that a clean farm and clean trays is not our problem when we face one with a crop. So that was sort of step one that solved a lot of our problems. Beyond that, the only 2 real specials that we have are basil and celery that get humidity dome germinated. And beet was another one, which for a long time we kept it in that category of, this is special, it needs high airflow, it needs really delicate attention. But then one day we got a seed lot from Mums in Canada, and the beet was just incredible. And it was like, oh, it wasn't us, it wasn't our protocols, it wasn't our cleanliness. It was that we just had a really bad lot of seeds, and we just kept getting bad lots of seeds. And so we just kept overplanting and babying it, and that was for like a year or more. And then we got this seed lot, and we're like, oh, it wasn't us, it was bad seed. And I think if you solve the variables of climate and cleanliness and things like that, usually when people reach out to us on Instagram saying they have a problem with something, they'll give me the context and it sounds like everything else is right. And I say, you probably just have a bad seed lot. Probably either got it bad or you've had it for too long. So that's sort of been our journey. We still have our problems. Shiso, I don't know what's wrong with it. I can't figure it out.
Yeah, it's hard to know what a bad seed is if you've never had a good seed for a specific variety.
Yes.
So this is especially true with sunflower, that people
Mm-hmm.
struggle with it a lot, because they buy one lot and they're using it for 3 months and just like, I can't figure it out. It's often the seed that is the issue, and it's not for most varieties. Seed is not the main issue, but it's a if it is an issue, there's really nothing you can do to solve for a bad seed. It's like there's certain factors, like if you're growing in the dark, the light is going to be your weakest link in your chain
Yeah.
of growing variables. If you have bad seed, that's going to be your weakest link. And no matter what you do, you can optimize perfectly everything else. If
Yes.
your seed is not properly is not of good quality, then doesn't matter what you do, you're not going to have a good result. So it's important for people to know that, especially when starting out, that there's like, oh, it's seed to seed, and
Right.
this could grow beet microgreens.
I I think the way I put it once on my Twitter was, good environmental conditions can never compensate for poor seed, but good seed can compensate for poor environmental conditions. You want both, but I'd rather have the best seed in the world over the best environmental conditions any day.
Yeah, yeah, because it's kind of like the starting point. Like
Yeah,
without the seed, nothing. You don't have microgreens. So
yeah,
having good quality seed
yeah,
is something I yeah, in consulting that I do, I tell people very often is that, like, where are you getting your seed, and have you
yeah,
tried other sources? And then having these other sources that are much higher quality can often completely solve a problem that someone's been dealing with for many months or years sometimes, which is
yeah.
crazy. We're almost out of time, but I wanted to ask you if you can go back in time to when you started your farm about 3 years ago and meet your younger self, young Garrett. What advice would you give him to set them up for success with their microgreens business?
I would say once you hit a certain number of varieties, arbitrarily, probably somewhere between 10 and 20, maybe 15 and 20, stop adding varieties. I think I think for most people, most times, and I say this as someone who has grown more than 40 and offered them on my menu and has now slowly started to cut back, beyond 20 or 25 varieties, it's just ego. You just want to say that you grow more. Really, if you look at your P&L, if you look at a breakdown of dollars of sales revenue from each variety, if you grow 40, 90% of your revenue is coming from 5 or 10. So stop adding varieties. Instead, focus on sales. Take all the effort you want to put into adding more varieties and just put it in sales volume. Just make more calls, reach out to more people. And I think part of it is the ego of saying you have more varieties or more varieties than the next guy. And half of it is that it's easy. It's scary to call people, to get rejected day after day, dozens of times a day, making sales calls, reaching out to people, not hearing back. It's easier to just spend money and just buy more seeds and plant more trays and think it's like productive procrastination. It feels like you're doing something good, but just put it in sales. Yeah, I think people, myself included, as sort of ancillary advice is just it's just a lot of sales. It's just
Yeah,
way more volume than you think. If you want to get to the place that Living Earth Farms is at, and where I'm at and where I want to be at, you just got to make lots of calls, lots of emails, lots of outreach. It sucks. You're going to get rejected. But once you learn how to grow 15 to 20 varieties, you're not a farmer anymore in that you're adjusting to a changing climate or changing pest demands or changing, nutritional quality in your soil. And you're changing to, you're adjusting to the changes in the market and what people want and the types of consumers you're serving. And it's just a lot of sales.
yeah,
I think figure out the core 10 to 20 varieties that you want, which is the same for most farms, your radishes, peas, brassicas, etc. And then take all that energy you want to put into growing more varieties and put it into sales.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think most people that get into microgreens, that get into it for the passion of it, want to grow as much as they can because that's what excites them. And it's the same thing with
Yeah,
market gardens. When you start out, you want to grow every variety under the sun. You get a
yeah,
seed catalog. It's like the most
yeah,
exciting thing in the spring, or like, February, you get a seed catalog and spring's coming up. It's like the energy you get from just seeing all the cool varieties you can grow,
yeah,
is really exciting. But you got to consider, do you want to be a technician and, like, in the sense of be a grower and be a grower exclusively? It might make more sense to work for a microgreens farm.
yeah.
And a lot of people may just want to do that. They just want to grow. They don't want to run a business. That there's nothing wrong with that. But if you want to have your own farm, at the end of the day, you have to run a business. So
You have to be
sales is a
disciplined.
big part of it, and you should move towards whatever you are most scared of in business, and overcome that fear early on. So sales for me was a big one. I wish I had this mindset that I have now about pushing towards discomfort, because if I did that earlier on, the farm would have advanced much faster rather than kind of what you said, the easy route, which is like to keep producing more varieties and keep perfecting the growing recipe rather than actually growing the business. And there's a balancing between the two, but I think it's important to push through that discomfort and do the things that you find are hard. Or if you want to look at it in the weakest link model, what is your main weakness in running a business, and then develop those skills. And the best way often to develop those kind of skills is to just actually do it and fail and learn from that.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So this has been amazing. This has been a great interview. There's tons and tons of valuable insights in here. If listeners want to connect with you and learn more about your farm and about you, where can they find you online, on social media or your website?
You can just go to PiedmontMicrogreens.com for our website. But a lot of the content I try to put out, which is a mix of education and comedy, is on our Instagram at Piedmont Microgreens. For example, right now, as we go through the commercial space acquisition, I wish somebody else that had scaled through that before us had shared more about their process of, what is due diligence? What are you going to need to find out? What contracts need to be signed? What information are you going to need to come up with? How are you going to design the space? What do you need to take into consideration for HVAC and electrical? So that's the type of stuff I hope to share there. And that's really my main platform. And then for our new software for Microgreen Manager, we've tried to at least create a presence on all of the platforms. So mainly Instagram and TikTok. We have a Facebook page, Microgreen Manager. And then if you go to microgreenmanager.com, right now it's just a landing page. So you can see a little bit about the software, and you can put your email in to get notified as we approach that public launch date. And we're really excited to share that with everyone.
Awesome. Yeah, definitely follow Piedmont Microgreens on Instagram. Their account is great in terms of just information, sharing information. They're kind of doing what we should have done when Living Earth Farm expanded and showcase that. If you're interested in expanding your farm or what it looks like to actually do that, definitely give them a follow and check out some of their content. Thanks so much for coming on, Garrett. This was amazing. This was a ton of insight and a ton of wisdom from your last 3 years of running Piedmont Microgreens. And I really thank you for coming on and sharing all that with us.
Of course, it was a pleasure to be here, and it's always fun to talk about the nitty gritty with someone who's been there.
Thanks for tuning in to the Microgreens Mastery Podcast. To access a wealth of insights, just click the subscribe button, stay notified about each new episode, and enjoy all of this wisdom for free. If you're ready to supercharge your microgreens business, visit microgreensconsulting.com for a gold mine of guides and resources. We've transformed thousands of microgreens businesses, and you're invited to join the success story. Let's stay connected. Follow us on YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok at Microgreens Consulting for exclusive content and expert tips and wisdom. If you found this episode insightful, please leave us a review, spread the word, and let's share Microgreens magic with the world. Until next time, let curiosity fuel your growth, and may happiness be your harvest. Happy growing, everyone.